Welcome to the Flakemiri podcast, a show about Gwent, but it's so much more. And I think that you guys by now have, I guess, kind of assumed that there's going to be Gwent content, but you're also going to get some little bits of wisdom from Shinmiri and I, and that is who I'm joined by. Again, after a 1 week absence out fighting crime, Shinmiri is back with us. Nice to see you again, buddy.
Hey, good to be back, Flake. Welcome, everybody, to episode 9 of Flakemiri, The Rise of Milva.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I tried to figure out what Rise of Skywalker could turn into and kind of, situate it amongst where we're at and the angst of Milva. I couldn't really come up with something like Skywalker, Milva Walker, Walker Milva, Sky Milva. It didn't really work out today, but that said, today's episode is sponsored by nothing. It's an all-new 2022 all-wheel drive, Bluetooth-enabled, GPS, the whole 9 yards, absolutely nothing but our hopes and dreams. Again, Shinmiri, what say you? What plead can you make? If you know what sponsor would actually suit us? Like, if we could get one sponsor, what do you think what would you want?
I mean, anything to do with computers and gaming would be fine, in my opinion. Like, HyperX or whatever, like headset company, gaming chair company. I mean, you and I, HyperX, you and I both use HyperX headsets.
We do. We do. So, you know what's better than a HyperX Cloud 2 headset with disgustingly comfortable... First of all, I've had these headsets for about 6 or 7 years. I use them every single day for multiple hours a day. I take them with me to listen to podcasts on my phone when I'm like walking or doing whatever. I'm on the train. These headsets are... and this is not just a shameful bill.
I'm like, we haven't gotten paid, Flake.
No, exactly. Do you want to know how much I like or dislike HyperX Cloud 2 headphones? Well, the people at HyperX have to sponsor us, and we'll let you know. So send them all your mail and let them know that this podcast is waiting for sponsors. But for now, it's nobody.
Yeah, and as always, we start things off with the official Dagon rumor report. Still not a thing, but what I want to know, Flake, is what you and Berja did with the Dagon rumor report last week.
Yes. Last week. Last week was a special week because Berja was on the show instead of you. So we didn't do a mailbag, but we did dive into a few things. One of which was we did talk about the whole Renfrey thing, and then we talked about Dagon. And again, the script and the whole Dagon rumor report thing. He read it and he's like, and then he dove into it, saying that it's not happening. Like it's not on any like I think chopping block in the short term, let's say. Mm-hmm. But apparently it's something that isn't not out of the realm of possibility of actually becoming a thing. So is that because of us? I'd like to think that perhaps you and I and the constant, shameful, little bird seed I've left out regarding Dagon and every single broadcast that CDPR puts on that I'm involved with. I think that could be partially part of it. Like in the same regard that Renfrey guy has, been knocking on that door for almost over half a year now. I think that, for us to say that perhaps if Dagon comes back, it's because of us, I'd like to think that.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder how many people actually believed that Dagon was coming back because of you.
I will say this. The demographic of those who believe what I say is dwindling. However, there are still a select few that still fall into my naughty little traps of Dagon nonsense. Every time that there's a CDPR broadcast and I say something fog related or Dagon related or weather related, like, let's be fair, I'm completely speaking directly out of my ass. But at the same time, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like it's nice to give people hope where maybe there was none. And who knows, maybe in a year from now, maybe in March, we'll see Dagon. Like, I don't know. I don't know these things. It might
I think it's totally possible. They have an asset, like an art for it that's unused, right?
Dude,
so
all the stuff's there, right? Like all they need is game text.
Exactly.
All right. So what happened this week in Gwent 4 years ago? Well, now, as I was digging Shinmiri, and I was dying for this one because this one is a really juicy one. So what happened in 2017 around in this week. I'll let you say it because it's a really, really nasty one.
December 2017. Gwent was on a high.
Mm-hmm.
Challenger number 2, I think, just happened. That was the one in the Nilfgaard Castle. And now, it's the middle of the winter, and Gwent Midwinter patch comes out in December 2017. What was that all about, Flake?
Oh boy. Well, let's dig into a little bit of Gwent history here. And you're right, it was on a high. And also the fact remains, my friend Shinmiri, is the fact that they had made some lofty promises in terms of what the card pool would be by the end of 2017. They said that the card pool would be like 500 cards, if I'm not mistaken. And at that point
From
in time,
the update alone?
No.
Game?
They said that in the entire game, the card pool would be at 500 cards by year's end. That was a promise that they made that year, if I'm not mistaken. Now, in December, the beginning of December, there was like just shy of 400 cards. So they needed to drop one hell of a content patch at the end of the year. And it was one of those things where they kind of... Now, I'm obviously being overdramatic here. But basically, what they did was it was the equivalent of rolling a grenade into the room and then leaving the country. Like basically, they dropped midwinter on us and then went on vacation, which everyone's entitled to in vacation. I'm not saying that, shame on them for doing that, but they dropped the midwinter update, which in reality was a little less than ideal when it came down to not just the content that was dropped, but the direction in which the midwinter update took the game.
Yeah, like my memory is even a bit fuzzy about it now, but I remember, midwinter update introduced the keyword create, which a lot of people were not happy about because Gwent was seen as a game that was really, really low on RNG, super focused on skill and outplaying your opponent. And create was reminiscent of the Hearthstone keyword discover, right?
Yes.
And people were getting like massive Hearthstone PTSDs. A lot of people came to Gwent from Hearthstone as Hearthstone refugees, along with the life coach wave, promised a promised land where skill triumphs over RNG. And to see this RNG heavy keyword create put in the game, people didn't want any of it. Like they didn't care if create was actually healthy or not. It was just like a knee-jerk reaction to hate it.
Yeah. Essentially, there were I don't want to call them shortcuts because I don't want to necessarily put into question the abilities of the people who created these cards, but at the same time, there was a lot of cards that were essentially just kind of mirror images of each other. Like there was a play for 4, damage by 5. There was a play for 4, boost by 5. There was a play for 5, damage by 4. There was a play for 5, boost by 4. There was a lot of these types of cards, and then there was the entire situation of play a low to the ground unit, like a 1-cost unit or a 1-strength unit, to spawn another bronze card from your opponent's faction or of your faction. So this was also, I think, at one of the pinnacles of what, at the time, the reimagining of what bronze value should be. Because keep in mind, this was, I think, before there was still the 4 gold, 6 silver, whatever amount of bronzes. But so the bronze value was set around, it was like 9 conditional 11 or something along those lines. But an average of 10 was what you wanted to get. It was like between 8 and 11 was where your bronze value was going to be. So when you play a create card that is a base value of 2, there's a really good chance that of that create, you're going to find something that's going to fit the mold to take you over the top. And this was also the emergence of essentially what is, in my opinion, was basically a calculated and like fully parsed out, mathematically correct dwarf list that was like, this is a list that is the maximum amount of points that you could possibly get out of these 6 silver, 4 gold, whatever slots. And
was it casino dwarves? That list?
I don't know if you'd call it casino doors, but it did have a lot of create mechanics. But it became, because it wasn't exactly an interactive deck list. So the game basically became like, okay, I'm down by 9 points. What card in my hand will get me 10 points?
Was that the patch that had War Dancer?
What? No. War Dancer was after Homecoming.
That was after Homecoming. I don't remember. I don't remember anymore. I'm telling you, old man memory. War Dancer was the card that like could randomly jump out of your hand or something like that, and or out of your when you mulliganed it.
When you mulliganed it,
it would jump out and it would prevent your opponent from dry passing. Basically, get you card advantage.
Correct. That was the nastiest thing that ever happened in that game. I mean, let's be fair. And I don't blame you for not remembering these. A lot of this I would probably, if I had any kind of medical degree, it would be like a PTSD if I were you, frankly, just like blocking this stuff out. But that dwarf list was basically that. It was like, here's a very solid list that is all proactivity for massive amounts of points. This was also part of, you must remember this, like how to make like 5 bronze card advantage spies. Not bronze.
Yes, this was the introduction of Summoning Circle.
Mm-hmm.
Summoning Circle was introduced in this in this midwinter update that allowed you to copy the last unit that your opponent played, which would include silvers. It would be bronze or silvers. I don't think it would copy golds, but it would include silver, so if your opponent played a spy, you would Summoning Circle to play the spy back, and you would keep the card advantage that way. It would be a way to play a second silver spy. And any deck that didn't play Summoning Circle would just be down on card advantage, like 80% of it.
Yeah. It was basically, for those who don't know, the silver spy was like a high-value, a disloyal unit that drew you a card. It had an additional effect, but ultimately, your whole objective of having that card was it allowed you to bleed your opponent in round 2 without potentially giving up a card. Creative players used to they would do the Summoning Circle thing, and so they would line up like 3 or 4 of them on their opponent's side, and then just igni them all down and have a massive amount of cards. So it didn't even matter at that rate, right? So midwinter update, to say the least, was, I mean, let's be fair. Was this the catalyst for the redesign that became Homecoming?
Yeah, I think so. I think like there was such a negative reaction after midwinter that like early spring in 2018, CDPR was like, okay, we fucked up with midwinter. We're going to have to, figure out how we want to take the direction that we want to take the game from here, and we're going to do something. We're going to move the design more towards the original vision of Gwent and do a project Homecoming, and redesign things, shake things up, make it into a way so that we can continue producing and designing new cards for the game without being locked into the system where we have a very limited design space, because there was no provision system in beta. So there wasn't this additional lever for the devs to balance cards with in terms of power level.
Yeah. Like adding that extra knob to dial cards back or up or whatever, like the provision system was super important. I think that it was incredibly... it's almost like a pseudo mana system in terms of how you play cards, but like for other card games, where you have to pay for them to a degree. It's kind of like you're paying for them in the construction phase, in the deck building phase, which frankly is important. And, for those of players who are, above average, they understand the fact that sometimes if you see 1 or 2 different cards, you're like, okay, if he's playing provisions in this, he probably doesn't play this or that. Or if she's putting provisions into this card, then she's probably doesn't have space for X, Y, Z. So frankly, the provision system is a nice little reboot. I mean, midwinter was like the villain we needed for the hero that eventually rose to be Gwent as it is now. But you're right. Like for all the quote unquote Hearthstone refugees that left the RNG element, the create factor, which was immensely dialed back. I think that was something that they walked back quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Is we have create now, but it's to a degree where it's controlled create. Like cards like Brothans, cards like Hattori, like these are the kinds of create that we want to see. But people need to understand is back in the day, create was just like was always seeing plus value.
They were more like the create back in the day in midwinter was more like the UMA kind of create, where the pool was massive and the variance was high, rather than stuff like Brothens or Arturius create, where it's like based on your starting deck or a small pool of things like, for example, like Runeword has a limited and Bountiful Harvest up until this patch. Even this patch, it still has a limited pool of things that you're creating from.
Yeah. Part of it also was that people were just upset of the fact if it's like, okay, I'm gonna use a runestone in my silver slot, and I know that this silver card is probably going to be worth about 12 to 17 points for me, but there's an outside chance that I roll like the nuts, that I roll the particular answer I need. So it really soured people's experience, because they would have a significant lead, and then suddenly somebody, high rolled a silver that was the perfect answer to the particular, like high rolling into an Abaya that then produced a Lacerate to punish a row. People were like, come on, like they don't even play monsters, and they high rolled this card or whatever, so the outcome of what Gwent we see now, and if people are complaining about how certain cards have create value, I haven't heard a single complaint about create, in all honesty, up to now. Because even a card like Gerhardt, I think, is a product of the developer team learning from the mistakes of Midwinter and the haunting aspect of what create used to be.
Yeah. I think as long as like the pool is limited, the variance between the results are generally, pretty even, and we don't have like super crazy outliers in the create pool in terms of value, then I think it can be healthy, and it can be skill intensive, because some of these create cards, you have to pick very carefully when the timing of when you use them, because you want to set up a situation where you have a lot of good outs and not that many bad results, right? So that the chances of you finding something good is high.
Yeah. So there you have it. That was it. I mean, there were other things that occurred this week in Gwent. There's a lot of like holiday events and stuff. And frankly, once I kept scrolling back, I said, what week was it? And then I found it. I was like, yeah, we're just going to talk about this, because this is probably the most poignant event in Gwent history. So 4 years ago this week, I believe it was exactly on the 18th or the 19th. So it's within this kind of wheelhouse of time. But yeah, there it is. Midwinter update, Shinmiri, 4 years ago.
Yeah. All right. So moving on. As always, we have your questions in the mailbag around the corner. But before that, we want to discuss the 12 new cards we got, because 1 week ago, we received a patch with 12 new legendary cards. And how do you feel after 1 week? What are your opinions on these 12 new cards? We also got a hotfix today.
Yes, the hotfix did happen today. So today is the 14th of December. That's when we're recording this. And the hotfix occurred today. It's to the pleasure of many, as myself included, and to the ignorance is bliss of some others that I faced on ladder, who dropped the Radovid playing Uprising and was like, very curious as to why it didn't work. But the 12 cards we got, Shinmiri, again, we've seen this in the past. I think we got it last year as well, or something like that. There was the patch
earlier this year in like February or something.
Yeah, which feels like eons ago by now.
I know.
But like the Brewer patch, I call it the Brewer patch. But that patch, these cards are spectacular. And the more time that elapsed, like I know that the first thing was people were saying, okay, Radovid's broken. It's way over the top. It's like we're 30 plus points sometimes. It's ridiculous. Get it. Awesome. Yeah, that is well documented, and it has been fixed. Milva, however, I still don't think that Milva is as big of a problem as many other people do. I think that it might be slightly overtuned, certainly, but this outcry of people that want Milva to die and be erased and yada, yada, yada. I mean, I don't think that this is not just going to be a full rant about Milva. This whole episode, we're going to dive into all the cards to a degree, but I just want to give my first impression, and that is the fact that Milva is slightly overtuned, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a slight change to one element of Milva. I don't know for sure what that's going to be. Even if I did know, I couldn't tell you. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a slight change to her to a degree, but I think as she is now, I think she's still okay. I think she's fine. I think that the outcry for Milva is the fact that she supports an archetype that people are already not having a good time playing against, but at the same time, a lot of that angst I feel, Shinmiri, is the fact that these players don't necessarily hate the card, they just hate playing against control, and I get that, because control is not always a pleasant experience, but don't hate Milva because you can't beat control, is all I'm saying, because there are ways around it, and if you're too stubborn to change your game plan because one card is beating you and you want everyone else to change, that's on you, because you could play a whole different, play a different card game, or not different card game, sorry, but play a different deck, play a different archetype. I played Death Wish. Milva didn't really have as big of an impact on me when all the stuff that they're killing they were losing value on.
I think that you definitely you definitely have a point that players hate control and hate getting their cards touched by their opponent, whether that's in the form of damage, killing all of your engines, or like Mill with Nilfgaard doing shenanigans to your deck or your hand or whatever. Yeah, people hate getting their strategy disrupted, and that's definitely added some hatred or level of outcry volume to the anti-Milva people out there. You didn't really hear as much of an outcry for Radovid, because Radovid with Uprising was just points on their board. It wasn't stopping you from doing what you wanted, right? Right. So yes, control is part of it, is part of the reason why people hate Milva. And yes, there are ways to play around it. There are archetypes that are better against it, like Death Wish, like you mentioned. But I have to disagree with you that when you say that Milva is fine in terms of power level. I think she's really, really strong. I think she's close to equivalent of a 30-point card at 11 provisions that you would play from your hand. So basically, I think her power level is roughly similar to that of Radovid with Uprising. And because she's able to answer, she allows you to answer so many different things with your leader charge, with making a bomb, with saboteurs, dragoons, Malena, rock barrage even. So I think she's too strong, and I think she deserves a nerf, but if she will get a nerf or what that form will take, I think we'll have to wait until at least January to see, because the hotfix is out. They didn't do any balance changes in this hotfix. It was solely reserved for bugs and bug fixes. Mm-hmm. So stuff like Weavis Incantation, Morkvarg with Onslaught, Radovid interaction with Uprising and stuff like that.
So the part about Milva that, I mean, the 30 for 11 provisions, I mean, you have to have it perfect on the spot. I ran into Northern Realms Shields, and it was an absolute nightmare. The Milva interactions were awkward. They were suboptimal. It didn't quite work out. Same thing when I played against a Death Wish list or any list that ran a lot of armor. It was problematic. It wasn't clean. For decks that just willy-nilly threw units on the ground, like playing against let's say a Nilfgaard list that ran, you throw out there and automatically your Blightmaker gives me plenty of targets for bombs and movement and death blows and whatever. I agree with you. I think that she's absolutely probably the strongest of all the new cards, in my opinion, because not only is she strong on her own, but you cannot touch her. You can't do anything. Even my Saskia has had treason kill her so many
Delirium.
times. Yeah, delirium, treason. Like, there are ways to do it. I was even thinking, like, is it worth it to even run Blizzard? Like, most of the first units that they play is Blizzard kills like all the lowest units on the board, right?
Yeah, so it's usually a 4, and so there's 2 4s there. One of them Saskia, and you could Blizzard both of them.
And you Blizzard both of them, and that's not the worst thing in the world, right? There are ways to do it, and I get it. It's not always feeling good, but I think that the nerf for her, don't change her ability, don't give her devotion. I think what you need to do is give her a tougher way to put her back in the deck. And ultimately 2 points of damage is not easy to do, you know, if you're stacking it, but maybe that 2 should become a 1 is an option. The other option is maybe you just nerf her provisions. And I hate to say that, but maybe you just have to choke the rest of what that deck wants to do. But ultimately, I don't think that solves the problem. Like provision buffs and changes, I think, are typically the when the card is just right, you maybe hike a provision or deduct a provision. But when the card itself and how it operates is what's kind of oppressing everyone else and promoting that particular deck, then that's a tough story. But I mean, in reality, there, like when I'm playing that Milva list and I'm up against something else, and I'm just like playing the Milva list and running into like Symbiosis, you're like, holy Moses, like I'm never gonna not have a target to kill. Like it's just gonna be so easy.
Mm-hmm. I think that, yeah, I really like the design of Milva. I think it's super flavorful. I think it's really skill intensive in terms of like figuring out how to sequence properly to make sure that you figuring out what answers you use for what targets and what sequence in order to keep the death blow alive, and so that she can go safely back into your deck and not get killed through damage or stolen or whatever, and then you just don't get her anymore for any of your movements. I just think that her numbers are a little bit too high. That, yeah, she could use, like you said, that change her order ability from 2 to 1 damage, so that not only is she losing the range of how much damage she can add to a movement to remove something, but also make her significantly harder to get back to the safety of the deck with the death blow, and with a death blow 1 instead of a death blow 2. That would be a pretty big nerf, but I think it would still be a strong card, and I think it would still see some play in certain archetypes in certain decks for Scoia'tael, whereas right now, I feel like she's so strong that she's kind of hijacked her way into every single Scoia'tael archetype.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't want her to be like this auto-include level.
I'm trying to like equate it to something else, but like, you know, when a card is just too good that you have to shoehorn it into anything, any idea that you want, like Fuchsia. Like Fuchsia's so damn good that it's just goes in everything. It goes in all of your Scoia'tael, all of your Skellige lists, because it's just that damn good. As you know, same thing like Sunset Wanderers. Like Sunset Wanderers was when it came out, I'm like, this is just too good to not have in absolutely every single deck. Like you had Sunset Wanderers, Skellige Witchers, Sunset Wanderers, hyper thin Nilfgaard, Sunset Wanderers, this, that, whatever. Like every deck seemed to have a variant of itself.
Devotion decks went out of their way to break Devotion so that they could play Sunset Wanderers, and that was just how good it was.
So you're right. I think Milva is certainly overtuned. I think I like that, but like you, I said I like the flavor of the card as well, and I think that it was a card that was meant to promote movement, because movement never really got off the ground. It kind of had legs at a certain point when with the Dryads and the Elf Sentinels, I think they're called Sentries. The Cat Witchers bouncing around and doing their thing. Like there that bronze package for movement is humongous. Like that is a great engine package that you can have, but it never got off the ground because it never beat Symbiosis in terms of points or anything like that. It never was better for point slam style stuff than the Alzur Precision Strike list kind of was in that regards. It's a card that really tried to put that into relevance, much like Torque tried to put hand buff into relevance, and it was out. It was like imagine Milva is like Torque, but on steroids in terms of what it does for the particular archetype it's trying to support. So much so that, like you said, it has basically shoehorned its way into every single variant because it's that good.
Mm-hmm.
That's
exactly.
Milva.
So what do you think about the other 11 cards? We spent so much time on Milva already.
Okay, so we spent all this time on Milva, and I think rightfully so, because it is clearly the best one. So, but in my honest opinion, my favorite card is Jan Calvate, and I'll tell you why. Because Jan Calvate allows for you to, and I played a Jan Calvate list with tactics, probably about 5 or 6 hours one stream, and what I found with it is like it doesn't matter what's on the tail end of your deck. I had a 26 card deck because most of it was just duplicates of useless tactics, so that I can have an Enslave 6, guarantee my Calvate's in hand, and then just steal something for 6. And it is such a huge tempo play that you can use to steal big pieces. But the reason why I loved it is that when you go into round 2, you know exactly what you're drawing, and you know what your Joaquin is getting. So you have so much reach in round 1 with your leader ability and doing your nastiness and just playing your Blight Makers or playing whatever cards you have for tactics and whatever. And then you go into round 2, and you can double Joaquin. And if you haven't played your Blight Makers yet and you've lined up your deck, that Joaquin is probably going to go Blight Maker into Blight Maker for massive amounts of tempo. And you're kind of out of gas for round 3 for the most part. But ultimately, you're probably so far ahead in that round. And in that list, I ran a Damien. The beauty of Calvate is the certainty of what you're getting. It's basically the ultimate thinning card. You don't need to thin with it because you have reliance. It just basically cuts off the bottom half of your useless deck. It just trims all the fat out and allows you to perfectly draw exactly all the fire you need, unless you run into Mill and they absolutely just ruin your show. That's which has happened.
Yeah, I really, really like Calvate as well. I think it's a super creative card. Enable some 2-0 strategies. It's also difficult to play. It's not something that you just always want to play in round 1, especially if you end up losing round 1. You'd actually maybe rather play it in round 2 so that you don't have a handful of really, really good golds as your opponent just like bleeds so much value out of your hand. So I think it's a pretty creative kind of card. I was playing, brace for it,
Don't.
Shoop Redea Calvite. Shoop Redea Calvite with Enslave 5. I was playing that today. It was a deck list from one of my viewers, Trader from Uranus. Got to give him a shout out. And he
I don't know why. So, no matter what it is, either we're streaming or casting or doing whatever, anytime I hear you say something that I would say with pure joy, it just cuts through me, and I love it. Sorry.
So he shared this deck list with me, and it looked pretty interesting. It looked actually maybe kind of good. It played Calvate with Shoop and Redea, like no other consistency tools, but you would draw all your top end anyways. And I went 7-0 with it on stream, 100% win rate, undefeated, beating No Units Milva, beating Jackpot Savola, and other weird decks as well.
So I think the beauty of the card, besides the fact that it creates a completely reliable draw system for your deck, is the fact that you can. It's a card I think that needs to get a little bit more work put into it, a few more people to sort of just break it to find the perfect sequence of what they're going to draw and the timing of when to drop it. Because if you suspect you're going to lose round 1, you probably want it to play as part of the bleed, or to just drop for the dry pass in round 2 so that your round 3 is pure fire. So I think that it's a card that, if I was going to make a hot take kind of prediction, I think that in a couple weeks it is going to be probably the Calvate Nilfgaard lists are going to be fairly strong. That's just my impression. I think that there are smarter minds than mine out there that can probably put work into it and figure it out. But I'm waiting and ready for Assimilate to not be the Nilfgaard go-to.
Yeah, it's interesting. And honestly, I don't think we have time to talk about all 12 of these cards in detail.
We'll pick like one or two more, but yeah.
I want to say that I really like... I just can't believe... I'm so pleasantly surprised by how much the meta has shifted with just the introduction of these 12 cards and like a couple of balance changes. And there are so many more viable archetypes now, and if this is a sign of what's to come, with CDPR's promise and pledge to kind of revitalize old underplayed archetypes, bring them up to the power level of current archetypes that are already in the meta, then I'm really happy for this, because I feel like there's 20, 25 plus archetypes that are pretty viable now at the 2500 MMR level.
Well, today, so I got to pro rank today with Quad Madoc Arrakis Queen. And then immediately after, this was the sequence of games I played. I got High Roll Milled. Then I got beaten by a Cambi that sniped my Detlef. Then I got Aguara Trueformed into the most majestic of cards that would completely shut me down and kill me. What else did I get today? And I got Vigo Muzzled because I was playing against a list that I thought was... I forgot what faction it was, but they had already played Heatwave, and I didn't suspect anything else. So I let my Detlef sit on the board, and it was Precision Strike. And I had already seen the Heatwave, and I'm like, what else could you possibly do? You don't play locks. So what did they do? They pinged it with an arrow, and then Vigo's muzzled it over. And it was like, what the hell is going on? Like, in a sequence of 3 or 4 games, I experienced the entire world was upside down. I went from the standard procedure of, the grindiest of grinds, which is rank 3 to 0. And then I got let into this wonderland of nonsense where all these cards that I hadn't seen in a long time popped up. But you're absolutely spot on that these 12 cards, as strong as they are, and they're probably going to get attuned a little bit more in the next patch, has revitalized a lot of the existing metas, or not metas, archetypes that were there kind of floundering a little bit. And it's nice to see, because I think everyone was kind of tired of where we were for a little while leading up to Masters Season 3. So, but I'm really hoping that it's sustainable, that the next balance patch kind of keeps things okay, and fixes things to the degree that new things sprout up and new things kind of continue to develop. But it's nice to see vampires out there doing nasty things, flyers, pirates, movement, obviously, but there's there's so many tactics are a thing again because of Calvate and Ardal and all this other nonsense. Like, there's just
Deathwish, yeah,
Deathwish, absolutely. So many ways to play it, and it's nice to see. And all right, let's do one more card, and then we'll hit the mailbag. One more card that kind of caught you, not by surprise, maybe, but I told you that Jan Calvate was my sleeper pick and my favorite of the 12. There's got to be one that you're thinking is probably going to make a resurgence or kind of spike in popularity.
I think Ardal is a card that a lot of people in the community underestimated at first, and partially because they maybe didn't understand exactly what the card did. But I saw that, when they announced Ardal the day before the patch even went live, a lot of people in the community were like, this card is just bad, and why would you ever want to play it? But Ardal, I think now a week gone, I've played it a ton. I've seen other people try it out. It's a lot better than people think. It is, it's like a Dandelion Poet that has 3 better stats, and also has this bounce reset capability on certain units that are boosted that maybe don't have a deploy, and you can get a Dandelion Poet with better stats as well as a reset, all kind of rolled up in one. Really good against, for example, tactical advantage used on engines that they want to protect, for something like maybe like an amphibious assault into a student or whatever, and then you can just bounce it back to their hand. They have to play it out as like a 4, and then it gets turn age ousted or assassinated or coded weapons, which you couldn't do when it was protected by the AA, right?
Exactly. Trying to protect some of your units to get them going, engine pieces, things like Hamadryads that have just been, go out of control and get super tall and whatnot. Ardal is basically what it does. It's like you're basically removing that card and giving them a crappy card that they put a lot of stock into to draw a card. And if you take that in conjunction with Jan Calvate, you've basically given them a draw of a 4 or 5 provision card for your next best card in your deck, right? So it always trades up, and you just got to hope that your opponent puts a lot of investment into it. But you're right. I think that Ardal is a card that, like you said, it's like they got this laundry list of text on it that people are just like, what the hell? Like, I don't even let me play it and I'll see. But once you realize what it does, it's quite significant. It is quite significant. So fascinating that, my favorite card and your sort of sleeper pick or interesting card, both Nilfgaard cards, which kind of suitable given the fact that it's a faction that usually plays on the sly, so to speak. It's not always in, up in your face like, let's say, an Arrakis Queen is, or like the new Regis is. But yeah, great 12 cards. I gotta say, I don't think that there's one whiff on all of them. And for those who might suspect something like Ardal or whatnot are kind of weak, I think that there's still time for these cards to develop, and people are going to be creative, and you're going to see competitive lists that probably include a good half of these cards for sure.
I agree.
All righty. Well, that is the end of the first portion. We're going to be back around the corner with the mailbag, friends. Again, your submissions to the show, you can send them to Shinmiri and I on Twitter, on Twitch, on Reddit, wherever you catch us. You can go ahead and send in your questions. We'll be back with the mailbag.
Welcome back to Flakemiri, episode 9. We're at the mailbag portion of the show where we answer all your burning questions, whether it's Gwent related or not. So, Flake, why don't you start us off?
All right, I'll go first. This one comes from Dat Dude's Dude on Reddit, and I'll paraphrase here. What is the most sustainable way to keep Gwent relevant? Is it power creep to make new cards playable, introducing new mechanics or keywords? Is it frequent balance changes? What is it? So, what will keep Gwent relevant? And I guess if we're going to tie into this, Gwent is relevant. It's absolutely relevant. It might not be up there in terms of the stratosphere of like Hearthstone or Magic, let's say, but it is certainly a relevant game because it's so unique that it's hard to equate it to other things. But what would you say, Shinmiri, would keep Gwent stable and growing?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that that dude posted are good suggestions, right? Like frequent balance changes, new mechanics and keywords, and keep things fresh. But for me, the most important thing that I want to get from Gwent when I play it is, I want it to be fun. But what is fun? Fun is different for a lot of people. But for me, I would like to see a large variety of archetypes be successful and competitive and viable, so that you feel like you have choices and options and different ways to express yourself via deck building and playing and your deck choice, and not feel that you have no chance against the meta's top dog. So I think we're doing pretty well in that regard right now. Like we mentioned earlier, a lot of different viable archetypes right now. I think every faction has like at least 3 different viable archetypes that I can think of in terms of just like doing well on the pro ladder. Maybe it's not so true if you're trying to be the best of the best to try to climb to like 2,700 MMR or like to try to win Gwent Opens with. But I think if your goal is like 2,500, top 500 pro rank, you can play so many different.
What's worth noting is that when you look at other card games and their archetypes and their factions, quote unquote, to have Gwent have multiples of every faction be viable. Like I got to pro rank with a quad Madoc monster list. That's not like, if you want to get to pro, maybe you play Kelly, maybe you play Frost Control, maybe you play like, Relics or whatever. Like there's so many different ways to do it. You can get to pro rank with so many different options. And that's something that not many card games have. Because if you're playing Hearthstone, it's like, all right, this is the Warlock list that you're going to play. Okay, well, what about the Paladin list? Well, there's nothing good. But if you want to try, this is really your only option, and you really have to get lucky, and you have to do it well. Okay, well, what about, Hunter? Well, Hunter has 2 options. One's very good, and the other is like, it's good. Okay, what about
one's
Mage?
Go face, and the other one's go face a little harder.
Exactly. No, you're not wrong. So what people need to understand is that it's actually, for as much criticism as Gwent may have, where it's like, oh, the meta's only 5 decks. Really? Go play other games. The top of the ladder is not 5 decks. It's probably 2. So
or 3,
or maybe 3. Exactly. So the fact that Gwent right now has this many decks that are viable, not just like, don't get me wrong, on any 48-hour snapshot of a meta, you're probably going to have 3 or 4 dominant decks, but that's constantly shifting. I think that if Gwent wants to remain relevant, obviously content is important, tournament scene is important as well, but frequent balance changes is the way to not have to release content every month or two, but it's in itself, it's a revitalization and a rebalancing of the content that exists to make sure that it is proper. So every month they need to revisit and rebalance. And I'm not saying along the lines of completely rework. What Gwent community needs to stop immediately doing and polluting Gwent Reddit is reworking cards that don't see play immediately. Because if everybody listened to Gwent Reddit and reworked every single card that people post on there, cards like, I saw people wanting to change Osril. I've seen people wanting to change Dettlaff, and people wanted to change this and that. Well, new stuff comes in, new balance changes come in, and then suddenly these cards are relevant again. And I get it. Not everything is going to be Wolfpack is not going to be a 7 for 4 that most faction specific bronzes are. But at the same time, turning it into something that's stupidly OP is not going to save the game either. I think that balance changes are important on the regular. After that, content and just supporting of the competitive scene. And that, plus, I mean, let's be fair. Whatever this Golden Necker project is, which I'm not lying, it's not in my NDA or anything like that. I legitimately have no freaking idea what it is. But I suspect it's something cool. So that new content in the form of not cards as well is probably a big one as well.
Exactly. All right, next question we've got from Charbroiled Monk via Reddit asks, who has the larger glasses collection out of you and me? Well, I don't know about you, Flake. I basically have like one pair of main glasses that I wear every day, and then I have like a backup pair, which is my old glasses. The prescription's probably not super up to date, and I pretty much never wear them. I would only wear them if my main set broke for some reason.
Yeah. When it comes to glasses, Shinmiri and I are not fashionistas, wherein this is my pair for when I go out. This is my pair for when I do this or no. When we have our glasses, like these are objects of necessity. I don't know what your prescription is, Shin, but mine's -8 in each eye. So, like, you guys can Google what that looks like, what -8 looks like. Yeah, it's the worst. It's like I cannot. If my glasses are off, and I were to read a book, it would have to be probably about an inch away from my eyes because it's that.
I don't know. I did not realize that. That's really, really bad. I have, I think, like -3.5 and -4.5 between my two eyes, and I thought I was kind of pretty bad, but like -8 is legit.
Yeah, it's absolutely god awful. So I wear these glasses right here were legit. Now, I will say this. The brand name are Prada, but they were on sale by a large margin, and they just happened to suit my face. And people are like, oh, Prada. I'm like, yeah, they were like $100 for the frames. And the other thing about it is they have been like hyper thinned by as much, and they're still like Coke bottles.
So they've got like Nilfgaard Imperial Golems. And
yes, they do.
Is what you're saying.
Yes, they do. They're that thick. They're Imperial Golem level of thick. But in terms of glasses collection, I, like you, Shinmiri, have my old pair as a backup, which are in a drawer should these ever get lost or broken. But in that case, in all honesty, if these get lost or broken, I'm never finding that pair anyways because I can't freaking see.
Oh, I hope not. I hope that day doesn't come then.
No, it won't. So when I cast without glasses, it's because I have my contact lenses in. That's the other part about it. So yeah. All right. This one's from Aditya Mulia on Twitter asking, what tips do you have for someone who wants to start a career in broadcasting?
So I'm not sure if they mean broadcasting as like streaming on Twitch or more like trying to become a shoutcaster or an analyst in like official esports tournaments, these sort of things.
Well, so in a previous episode, I think you and I gave streamer tips, like on how to grow a stream or start a stream. I mean, we could take it from that regard as well, but also I think it's just important. Let's put it this way. Let's say they're already streaming. How do they become a better broadcaster in terms of just the act of, yelling at a microphone, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm not an expert on these sort of things, honestly. I don't know if I feel super qualified to give advice on this stuff, but I feel like you got to have your own brand or something that you specialize in. Like, I think for me, I try to make my content very educational and analytical so that people who come to my stream are here for high level gameplay, as well as like how to learning the game, how to play better, how to pilot certain decks better. And that's kind of the brand that I've built for myself. And that helped me get noticed by CD Projekt Red, and they eventually gave me a chance to be an analyst at one of their tournaments. And once you get your foot in the door, whether because you have a specialty or you have a lot of followers or viewers, then it becomes much easier to get more and more opportunities in the future.
Right. And that is certainly it. That's a great piece of advice. What I would add to that is having this, just like everything else, it comes with practice and experience. It's like playing a guitar. The more you do it, the better you'll be at it. The more frequently you do it, you can get rusty at it, as it were. For the first series of any Gwent Masters that you and I are casting, for me, is always a tough one. I mean, for me at least, I know that after the last Gwent Masters, I remember after day one, I messaged you privately and I said, I think I did. I'm like, I felt crappy or about the first quarterfinals because I felt like I was bad. I felt like I was lagging, but then it kind of caught up. It's one of those things that you just develop for. What I will say is having expanding your vocabulary to a degree is very important as well. And this is not an indictment of anybody, but in regards to how people kind of assess situations or describe situations, the crutch, everyone has a crutch. I have a crutch. Other people have a crutch. But the most common crutch I find is people saying that things are interesting, that this is an interesting play. It's an interesting card. It's an interesting thing. It's an interesting that. Not saying that it's not, but ultimately expanding your vocabulary to describe things is very important for yourself, growing as a broadcaster, as well as being able to just be a little bit more flowery and descriptive about a particular situation. It makes that particular situation more unique than the previous one when you change up the vocabulary you use to describe it. I'd say that, and not everything needs to be, I don't want to say acknowledged, but I'm taking this from the perspective of like Shinmiri and I working together on a broadcast. If somebody says something, you don't necessarily need to bridge what they say onto what you're saying with something like saying absolutely or exactly or for sure or whatever. You could just go with it. And that comes with experience. And I have always been the first to admit that I use crutch words all the time. I say things are fascinating, or I say things are, this or that. But practice is crucial to this all the time. And coupled with what Shinmiri says of just digging into what you're good at. If you're good at analytics like Shinmiri is, dig into that. Show people what you're bringing to the table, and I think that's important.
Yeah. So you heard it here first. Bust out the thesaurus. So expand your vocabulary and know what to say without having to think about it too much.
I'm not trying to like, this is not me saying this from a perspective of just kind of like dunking on anyone. That's not what this is about. But I find that a lot of people tend to lean on a word to describe things, and you're
absolutely right.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just there because it's an easy word to lean on that is better than just saying something is good or fun. It's interesting, but ultimately, playing a Dolbothana sorceress from Bountiful Harvest isn't interesting. It's pretty straightforward. Like it's not an interesting selection. It's an obvious selection. But
if something is truly interesting, then you should be able to describe what is interesting about that play or that event. And that's
exactly.
That's what you should say instead of saying, "Oh, that was interesting."
Yeah. It's he used the assassination to kill not Whoreson's freak show. That is a unorthodox choice. Like, that's it's interesting because that was probably the prime target for that spell, but it did not go there. Like, you're right. And but again, practice makes perfect. It's not just a spell for mages. Okay. Here's one. What are your goals for 2022, and what do you think Gwent's goals for 2022 should be? This is from Marimba Guy on Reddit. I think that it was your turn to read, and I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's fine. My goals, at least when it comes to Gwent for 2022, I would say I would like to write more written guides for decks. I don't think I'm really going to get into YouTube. I've tried the YouTube thing. I didn't feel like it was really for me. I enjoy streaming quite a lot, and I really enjoy writing written guides. And earlier this year, I wrote some more guides for decks that I was passionate about, that I really enjoyed, and also some like strategy stuff too. Like I wrote a Reddit post detailing a really good strategy to beat the Meditating Mage spam deck a couple months ago.
Yeah.
When that was out. And I really enjoyed that. And the community responded really well to that. So I'm hoping to do more things like that.
Yeah, you were kind of sitting on a pile of gold that like Smog would be jealous of, the amount of Reddit.
The rewards that I
got. So why, like, first of all, you're on YouTube like right now. Like this podcast is housed on YouTube, but I get it. Like it's not, it's produced by 983, and Mark this is a big part of this and all that. But why don't you do YouTube? Just out of curiosity.
It's mostly a time thing. Like it takes so much of my time. I don't know, when I made YouTube like video deck guys before, I'm sort of a perfectionist when it comes to stuff like that. And I don't want to do some half-assed job where I just put a clip of my Twitch VOD onto a YouTube video and slap it there and be like, all right, here you go. Give me 10,000 views on this video. Like I would make basically a long introduction detailing all the cards and how they're used in the deck, and then the strategy, the general overall strategy, some matchup specific strategies, some cool tactics you can do with the deck. And by the time I'd done that in the production of the video and cutting the stuff and making things sound good, like if I try to say part of my guide and there's a little bit of ums and ahs and it didn't feel very smooth, or it didn't feel like it felt like I was like reading from a script or something, I would try to re-record that, and it would just take so much. Like one video that had a 20-minute introduction section and 2 games on stats pasted on afterwards, and these games would be off-stream games. I didn't want to reuse on-stream games because on-stream games I'm like talking to chat, and it's just like weird for a YouTube environment, I feel like. So all in all, it would take me like 8, 9, 10 hours of production time total to make one video, and it was just not. I don't have that time to do that.
Well, your written guides were awesome, by the way. So what about your personal goals for 2022, like outside of Gwent? I mean, you don't have to tell us, but like you mentioned that those were your Gwent goals, and I completely respect that. But just curious, just like is there a New Year's resolution you want to slap down on us too? I mean, it might be too early for that, but we're
mainly personal goals. I think mainly just like be healthy, take care of my family. My mother-in-law, who's living with us right now, she had some health issues with her heart this past year. So I just want to make sure that she's okay with that, and just be there for my family. And yeah, that's mainly it.
That's the way to do it. Well, they're lucky to have you, buddy. What about goals for Gwent for 2022?
Well, we already got the roadmap, right, from CDPR.
Yeah.
I personally would love to see an expansion of the esports scene in Gwent, but it doesn't sound like CDPR are going to do that themselves. for this year. Maybe if there are other communities out there that want to support the esports scene with like prize pool and stuff like that, that would be really awesome. I would love to see something like that for the Gwent community.
Yeah, I think I think Gwent should focus. I mean, focus primarily on just. I mean, I know it's out of their hands to put these tournaments back in person. That's definitely out of their hands. They can't really do anything about that. I think, like you said, just making sure that the esports scene is as smooth and streamlined and like no drama or BS. Just get it done. But also, I think that they need to kind of branch out, because I feel like they've just basically nestled themselves in this nucleus, and treading water is not the right word I want to say. It just feels like they're just comfortable within their environment. And I think that there's this kind of feeling of agoraphobia when it comes to Gwent, where they don't like to just get out of their own little space to explore. One thing that I proposed to them a while ago that had the okay from Vlad, but that was before he was game director, was a North American championship. And they were going to fund it, and it was going to be a 2-day affair in Florida where we flew out all the qualifiers, and we're going to do an on location. We were going to rent 2 houses, like 2 kind of mansions or whatever with pools. There was going to be the production house, and then there was going to be the player house. We were going to fly them in. They were going to play. It was going to be a 2-day tournament scene where we were going to crown a North American champion. I think that they need to, and I'm saying this completely selfishly, but they need to have a little bit of a bigger boot print in North America, because I think that they're pretty solidified in Europe, and I think that North America is dominated by Hearthstone. It's dominated by Magic, obviously, Legends of Runeterra. But I think that Gwent can kind of ruffle some feathers if it decided to just slam down a prize pool just for North America and say, like, listen, we're slamming down 20 grand for a prize for a tournament for Gwent, and I think it could go down. I think it could work well. But yeah, I mean that's what I think Gwent should start looking to is just kind of stepping outside of the house and just exploring a little bit. Like, the way that I see it is that Gwent is kind of like Sam from Lord of the Rings, where it's like he takes that step and he's like, if I take one more step, it's going to be the furthest from home I've ever been. But they haven't left the front yard, Like, I feel like
I'm with you on that. I would love to see something like that, a North American championship, or for other regions of the world, and just for Gwent to step out of their comfort zone and actively try to expand their borders and expand their reach to members of the community who maybe not even know that the game exists right now.
Yeah, it's a good game, friends.
I hope they had their this past July they had WitcherCon. CD Projekt Red partnered up with Netflix to do WitcherCon, and I wonder if that relationship maybe can have more potential than is currently being used right now in terms of utilizing the Netflix Witcher series to promote Gwent and Witcher 3 and potentially Witcher 4 whenever that comes out.
Yeah, like CDPR, when Gwent was new, like they were out at all these conventions showing the game off, bringing in people, paying Kriparian to stream the game and do things like that. Like they wanted everyone to see how awesome it is. And what's very fascinating to me is that they were showing off the game at that state. Then, midwinter happened. There was some issues, and they kind of turtled a little bit from the marketing department and showing off the game. But the game as it is right now is in its best state, in my opinion, than it's ever been. So now's the time that you should be like, take a look at this. It's been a little while, but look how flashy and awesome this is. And people are trying it. And yeah, it's unique. And yeah, it's different. But maybe you like different, because you know what? Frankly, I didn't know I liked calamari until I tried it, because it looked ridiculous when I saw it, but I tried it and now it's delicious. So it's one of those things where, like, have a look where we're at right now. And I think that that's something that they need to work on. So that's just my stupid way of saying marketing the game and maybe having a little bit of a bigger boot print in North America. As for personal goals, I don't know, man. Like, I'm just happy to be alive. Like, that's basically where we're at. I'm just glad that I'm here with you and doing the podcast, and my objective in 2022 is, if you don't hate me by the end of it, is to have maybe another like 50 of these in the books. That's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Awesome. All right. Then, yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this week. Thank you guys so much for listening. Flake, I love you, man.
Hell, I see you took it right out of my mouth. I love you, and we love you who listen to the podcast, friends. Again, thank you so much for listening to Flakemiri. If you have any questions or you want to submit to the show, you can do so by tweeting at me at Shinmiri. You can reach us in Discord, on our Twitch streams. Leave a comment on this video, and please, friends, do follow this YouTube channel and catch us on Spotify, Google Pods, and Apple Podcasts. And as always, you're not losing if you're learning, friends. Keep shuffling the cards and play. You might win. Shamir and I will be back next week. Bye.
Bye.